Welcome to the Creative Writing Workshop podcast. The theme of this episode is rejection. You'll need a pen and paper or the notes app on your phone or a blank screen. The first few minutes will be a writing warm-up. Then I'll talk a little bit about why I chose this topic and why it's interesting for writers. And then we'll get to the main writing exercise. During the writing, I'll speak about every 2 to 5 minutes to give you a chance to concentrate. And towards the end of the main exercise, I'll give you an opportunity to press pause so you can write for longer if you like. Then I'll invite you to reflect on your writing. So, to warm up then, I'd like you to imagine the most beautiful cake that anyone has ever been presented with. Perhaps it's 3-tiered or 7-tiered or 30-tiered. Perhaps it's adorned with beautiful roses or your favorite action figures from when you were a child. And I want you to imagine being presented with this cake. You've been the client, you've ordered this cake, and now it's sitting before you, and it's astonishing. But it isn't good enough. Not at all. You can lean into the bridezilla trope if you like for this exercise, but it might not be a wedding cake. It can be any kind of wedding cake. And what I would like you to do is just give some feedback on this cake. I want you to demand changes. So you are being presented with something amazing. You don't like it. And you are going to make your opinion very plainly, even rudely known. I'll give you about 6 or 7 minutes. And now, if you're writing, then you can ignore this extra prompt. But if not, then have your main character, if they haven't already, taste the cake. How they react to that, whether it's genuine, whether the cake is delicious or horrible, and what they say about it, whether they're reliable or unreliable in their reaction, that's all completely up to you. And in the last couple of minutes of this exercise, you might choose to have another character enter this exchange, someone offering to help, but making everything much worse. And if that's really taken off for you, then feel free to press pause. Otherwise, bring the thought or sentence that you're on to a close. Even with just a warm-up exercise, it can be nice to finish very intentionally. Though, of course, stopping halfway through a sentence can also encourage us to come back and complete. That's up to you. And now, as a reflection for this exercise, I'd like you to have a think about how it felt to write, giving that very robust and potentially even rude feedback. Are you someone who's happy to be robust with other people and senses that they can grow from that? Or does it make you feel quite anxious to hold people to a certain standard, even when you've paid a lot of money for a service? You might think that there's a certain level of complaint that's impolite or seems ungrateful. And that can be quite an interesting thing for us to note about ourselves as writers, because it might lead us to give our characters too easy a time or be reluctant to embrace straightforward conflict when it's needed between characters. Or we might find ourselves writing characters who are too aloof, whose standards are too high for everyone else around them in the story, and um, we might examine whether that makes them, likable or sympathetic as main characters. So, as writers, we experience quite a bit of rejection. It goes with submitting to publishers and competitions. But I'd like us to leave that to one side for a moment and concentrate on our characters' experience of rejection. Sometimes new writers are accused of making things too easy for their characters, and that can be because you have a plot in mind and you want to get back to that plot. So it can be worth thinking what if you have a work in progress, if you're working on a novel, what would happen at any point if there was more rejection of what my main character wants and needs? And that could be love and acceptance, or potentially it could be help. It could be that they can't find the objects that they need to complete your story, or they are refused the guidance and mentoring that might get them to the next level and have to discover their way through in a different way. Rejection can bring out the best in people. So it can make our characters react in a way that's kind of, I'll show you what I'm capable of. Or it can send them back into a kind of comfort zone of not achieving, like, oh, okay, never mind. I didn't really want to be the chosen one anyway. I'm happy in my pajamas. So a character experiencing rejection can really help you to work out if they are a go-getter or a people pleaser. And in a longer piece of work, that will be really important in terms of whether or not they're capable of achieving all the challenges that get set to them within the story. Experiencing rejection and then reacting by deciding to reject the world in return is also quite a big trope, especially in fantasy. So I'm thinking here of the Jedi or witch or monk or teacher mentor figure who lives alone in the woods or on a forgotten island somewhere in order to commune with themselves or, their artistic or magical practice, but also they have completely rejected the world. And someone who has rejected the world and through the story learns to live in it again, that is a big archetypal story. And there I'm thinking of something like Shrek. That would be a great example of that. Um, and of course, what it means to be rejected and the effect that that has on the psyche is another type of rejection story that we all find very fascinating. And one of the most beautiful ones might be Frankenstein. It's someone who's profoundly rejected by society and finds acceptance and rejection and rejects the world. It can also mean literally spurning someone's advances, rejection, and some element of rejection, even if only temporary, happens in almost every romance story. And sometimes that might be due to a misunderstanding, or sometimes it might be an outright rejection. It might be a rejection between the two main characters who you want to fall in love, or it might be rejection by a family or a society of one half of the couple. Watching people get past rejection, overcome it, whether or not the rejection itself is real or imagined, is part of the fun of the romance genre. So, in this exercise I'm about to give you, you can choose whether or not to really embrace the role of rejection in a romance story, and you can load your scene with a whole load of sexual tension, or you could set that to one side if it's not your thing. Um, Being rejected can be a profoundly horrible experience, even without any kind of romance element to it. So don't worry about going with that. So as always, we're going to pick a main character. Um, and if you're not working with anyone at the moment, then you can just pick a name and an age, and we will get to know them along the way. Your character wants to get into a place, but there is a security guard in the way. And when your character approaches this place to go in, they are refused entry. Perhaps your character knows the guard and has feelings for them. Perhaps that's the romance in that story. So before we begin writing, let's pause and choose the nature of the place that they're trying to get into. It might be a public place like a bar or a theatre or a swimming pool. It might be a workplace. That would insinuate a whole other group kind of rejection from society, but a whole other kind of series of events that's being led up to them being refused entry to their workplace. It might be, slight twist on the exercise, their own family home that they're being denied entry to. They might know someone inside. They might be going to meet people. This might be terribly embarrassing for them. They might even be the performer at the bar or theatre. So they can have their own reasons for being desperate to get in. But they are going to be rejected from this by the security guard. And remember, your character can react more towards the sort of positive anger element of end of the spectrum. Um, they might think, "I'll show you. I'm getting into this place, and no one's going to stop me." Or they might, you know, need to plead and use their voice to get in, but ultimately not feel that they have any power to affect the situation, and that will guide where your scene ends up, or you might discover that by writing. So you have a character with a name and an age. You have a location that they're trying to get into. You can, if you like, begin a little way down the street and walk them up to this place so that you get a good sense of it. We, the reader, get a good sense of it as they approach. But when they approach, they meet a horrible security guard. And I'll give you a couple of prompts along the way. And if you are enjoying your writing, then completely ignore me. But if not, get your main character to completely bare their soul to this security guard. They're going to offer up a real intimate thing about themselves. They're going to tell a story about why they need access. They're going to begin it something like, look, the thing you haven't realized or that you don't know is, and let them make themselves feel really vulnerable in this situation. And once again, if you are enjoying your writing, then please do carry on. But if a prompt would be useful, I would invite you either to wind your characters up to real anger and violence if your scene so far has been fairly quiet, or drop it all down to the level of a whisper. So if you've previously been big and melodramatic, bring it right down to as quiet as it can be. See if that ups the level of threat. Threat can sometimes be very, very quiet. Or if your scene has been very polite, allow your character to really lose their temper and move to anger and violence. And now I'd like you, unless things are taking off and you would like to ignore me, I'd like you to consider a slight twist in this scene. The rejection from the security guard is based on them doing their job and the position that they're in as the security guard. So it's not going to cut as horribly as rejection from someone your main character knows and loves. So I'd like someone else to enter this scene now. It's going to be someone that your main character really trusts and has a right to expect some loyalty from. So it might be their best friend or a sibling, it might be their mother or their boss or their co-worker or someone they can reasonably expect to be on their side. But in fact, this person is going to join in with the rejection. They're going to side with the security guard. They're going to refuse entry. It might, to be supremely nasty, be that they themselves can enter this place, but they won't allow your main character to. So let's experiment with the idea of rejection from someone we already know, having built up the scene with your main character and someone who might be more of a stranger. If if you started off that they knew the security guard, then you could also experiment with having a stranger join the scene. If you need a few more moments, then I encourage you to just press pause and write for as long as you like. If not, then you can start bringing the thought or sentence you're on to a close. Have a think about what would happen if you carried this scene on. You can write a few bullet points for yourself about where it might go. Have a think about how the second character coming in, if you chose to do that, how this might be a moment in a relationship, a sibling relationship or a friendship, that changes attitudes. Sometimes when we realize that somebody isn't always going to be on our side, that can have a profound effect on how we feel about that person, even though realistically no one's going to be on our side 100% of the time. But if we are shown it vividly and made to feel embarrassed because we expected loyalty and none arrived, then that can be a moment that sours a friendship or sets it off on a whole new footing. So have a think if there's anything in what you've just written that would change the nature of the relationship. Even if it was between the main character and the security guard. You could also read this scene back and see if there's anything in there that completely surprised you. One of the things with a writing exercise like this is that you might have gone in with quite a lot of the knowledge about the main character and then found that they didn't react in the way that you expected whatsoever. And equally, that the security guard is really just a straw person who's dropped in there for this exercise, but they can very quickly become powerful or dynamic or charismatic. And suddenly we want to find out about this other character we're writing about. And potentially that can be because we allowed them to sneak up on us in a writing exercise rather than try and create them in order to satisfy a longer or more complex plot. So that can be one of the fun things about working like this, is this notion of unexpected elements creeping up on us in our own writing. As always, have a read back for any turns of phrase or nice descriptions or great dialogue. Draw around them in a different color pen or star in the margin. I think it's nice if we can go back through our notes and have a look at things that made us proud in that moment. And if you followed all of the prompts I gave you, then this could be a scene with quite a journey in it, from, a seemingly innocent encounter of rejection to someone becoming much more vulnerable and intimate than maybe the guard was ready for, up into anger and violence, or down into a kind of whispering, quiet power. And then the entrance of this other person. So if you followed all those, you might want to read back to look for the twists and turns and see how you manage those. Obviously, it's a off the top of your head writing, but was it abrupt? Was there a staccato feel to your writing? Or does it feel quite natural that your character would shift their mood? That can be another skill that can be really important for us to develop, is the idea that a character comes into a situation in your writing feeling one way and leaves feeling very differently, and how that shifts how other people relate to them can be really important and very interesting for us as writers to become conscious of as we develop. So that was a quick writing workshop on the theme of rejection, and I hope to see you next time.